She was 10 years old, barefoot, and invisible to the world. The Texas sun burned through the streets that afternoon, melting the pavement and people's patience. Strangers walked by with their coffees, sunglasses on, pretending not to see the small girl standing by the restaurant window. Her hair was tangled, her clothes torn, her hands trembling as she held out an empty paper cup. Her name was Hannah. Half Korean, half American, and completely forgotten by life. If you are new to our stories, subscribe to join the Whisper House family. 2 years ago, she had a family. 2 years ago, laughter and music filled her world. But one rainy night changed everything. The crash came out of nowhere. 1 second, she was singing in the back seat of her parents' car. The next, glass exploded around her like fireflies, and then, silence. Her mother and father didn't make it. Hannah did. But the accident took more than her parents. It took her hearing, her sense of belonging, her childhood. She woke up in a hospital bed surrounded by voices she couldn't hear, faces she couldn't understand. They told her she was lucky. But luck didn't feel like this. The relatives they called never showed up. The system lost her in paperwork. And when the shelters got too full, she slipped away, unnoticed. 4 months, she lived on the streets of Dallas, her only friend a torn stuffed rabbit she carried everywhere. She learned to read lips, to watch faces, to survive on scraps and hope. But hope was running out. That afternoon, she stood outside a fancy restaurant, watching people eat what looked like heaven. She spotted a man finishing his burger at a table by the window and walked up to him, pressing her hands together in a plea. The man turned, annoyed. He muttered something she couldn't hear, then frowned and waved her away. When she didn't move, he shoved his plate aside and yelled again, his mouth twisting into words she didn't need sound to understand, "Get lost." He pushed her shoulder, harder than necessary. Hannah stumbled backward, almost falling. Her lips trembled, her eyes filled, but no sound came out. She turned to leave, clutching her rabbit to her chest, wishing she could disappear. What she didn't know was that someone had been watching. Inside the restaurant, at a corner table, sat a man in a black suit, mid-40s, calm and distant. Wick Anderson. A name that made stock markets move and politicians listen. Billionaire tech investor, founder of Anderson Innovations, one of the most powerful men in America, and one of the loneliest. 3 years earlier, Wick's wife had died in a plane crash, leaving him with a house full of silence and a heart that had forgotten how to feel. He came to that restaurant almost every day just to distract himself, to drown in the noise he couldn't find at home. But that day, the noise faded. All he could see was that small girl outside being pushed away. There was something in her eyes, something he recognized. Not pity, not weakness, just quiet heartbreak. And for some reason it felt familiar. He couldn't look away. Before his mind could catch up, Wick stood, pushed his chair back, and walked outside. Hannah saw him coming and froze. She'd been yelled at enough times to know what came next. But Wick didn't scold her. He knelt down, lowering himself to her height, his voice soft. "Are you hungry?" he asked. She didn't understand the words, but his tone was gentle, his face kind. When she didn't respond, he pointed to the restaurant, then to her stomach, tilting his head with a question in his eyes. She hesitated, then nodded. Inside, the air went still as Wick led her to a table. The hostess frowned, whispering that she couldn't seat a street child there, but Wick's reply ended the conversation with one calm sentence, "She's with me." He ordered chicken tenders, fries, and a chocolate shake. Hannah sat perfectly still, watching the waiters, her eyes darting from side to side. When the food arrived, she stared at it like it was too good to be real. Then she reached out, took a single fry, and slowly brought it to her lips. The moment she tasted it, her shoulders shook. Tears rolled down her cheeks as she began to eat faster, like someone afraid it might vanish if she stopped. Wick said nothing. He just watched. Not with disgust or pity, but with a... This wasn't charity. This was something else. The forgotten instinct, the need to care. When she finished, she looked up at him and pointed to her ear, then shook her head. She was trying to tell him she couldn't hear. Wick nodded slowly, his eyes soft. He didn't know sign language, but he remembered a single gesture his wife once used when learning ASL for a campaign project. He lifted his hand and signed, awkwardly but clearly. It wasn't perfect, but it was enough. Hannah's face changed. Her lips curled into a small, disbelieving smile. Someone had finally spoken her language. When they stepped outside, Wick turned to say goodbye, but she followed. He stopped, gestured gently for her to go, but she shook her head and grabbed his sleeve. Her tiny fingers gripped the fabric like it was her last lifeline. And in that moment, Wick felt something inside him break open. He didn't know her name, her story, or even if this was the right thing to do. He just knew he couldn't walk away. "Come on," he murmured, more to himself than to her. And together, they walked toward his car. That night, he couldn't sleep. The image of her small face haunted him. The next morning, he called a contact at Child Services. Within hours, he had her file in his hands. Hannah Kim, born in Seoul, Korea. Moved to Texas with American father, Daniel Kim. Both parents deceased. Partial hearing loss due to trauma. Currently unplaced. No relatives confirmed. Case closed. Wick stared at the page for a long time. She wasn't a ghost. She was a forgotten name in a forgotten system. He made the decision before the day ended. He was going to adopt her. The lawyers thought he was joking. The press office begged him to reconsider. "Mr. Anderson," they said, "this could ruin your image. People will think it's a stunt." Wick didn't even blink. "Let them think what they want," he said. "I know what I'm doing." Weeks of background checks followed. Home inspections. Psychological assessments. Every formality the law required. But Wick never missed an appointment. When the social worker asked him why a billionaire would adopt a deaf homeless girl, he answered with a steady voice, "Because she deserves someone who won't walk away." When the day finally came, Hannah stood in the doorway of Wick's mansion, clutching her stuffed rabbit, eyes wide. She'd never seen a house so big. The marble floors gleamed like water, chandeliers glittered above, and everything smelled clean and new. But she didn't care about the luxury. What caught her attention was Wick's smile when he said, slowly signing the word he'd practiced all week, "home." She didn't know that sign yet, but she felt it. Tears filled her eyes as she dropped her rabbit and ran to hug him. That single hug changed them both. For her, it was safety. For him, it was life coming back. From that day forward, silence wasn't empty anymore. It was peace. Wick enrolled her at Riverbend Academy for the Deaf, the best school in Texas. At first, Hannah was shy, overwhelmed, and quiet. But she learned fast. Within months she was signing, laughing, drawing, making friends. Her teachers said she was gifted in art, able to express emotions words couldn't. Every day after school, she ran to Wick's car, waving, grinning from ear to ear. Every night, before bed, she signed "thank you." He didn't always get every gesture, but he always answered with that one sign she'd never forgotten, "TK." For the first time in years, Wick Anderson's home was filled with warmth. For the first time in her life, Hannah Kim wasn't surviving, she was living. But peace never stays quiet forever. One evening, while Wick sat in his study going through a mountain of paperwork, he came across a folder he didn't remember seeing before. It was Hannah's original hospital file, buried beneath legal forms and adoption clearances. He opened it casually, skimming through the details he already knew: age, birthplace, trauma, diagnosis, until his eyes froze on one line near the bottom. Emergency contact, Eleanor Grant. Relationship, aunt. He leaned back in his chair, frowning. No one had told him Hannah had a living relative. He read the name again, the signature beside it faded but real. An address in Austin. It didn't make sense. If this woman was alive, why hadn't she come for the girl? Why had Hannah spent 2 years alone on the streets? He felt anger rise inside him, a quiet rage that burned cold instead of hot. He closed the file and looked through the glass doors into the backyard, where Hannah was drawing on the patio with chalk, her little hands covered in color, her lips curved in a smile that could melt iron. He didn't want to break that peace. Not yet. But he had to know. The next day, after dropping Hannah off at school, Wick drove to Austin himself. The address led to a large corporate building, modern glass walls, silver lettering that read Grant Communications. He walked in, asked for Eleanor Grant, and was led upstairs. When she appeared, he recognized the type instantly: polished, confident, successful. The kind of person who'd never seen the inside of a shelter. "Mr. Anderson," she said, extending a hand. "What brings a man like you here?" Wick didn't waste time. "I adopted a girl named Hannah Kim," he said, watching her eyes. "Her file lists you as her aunt." For a split second, her smile faltered. Then she recovered. "Oh, that," she said softly. "Yes, my sister married an American. I lost touch with them years ago." "You didn't lose touch," Wick said evenly. "You were her emergency contact. The hospital reached out." Her eyes hardened, just for a moment. "I couldn't take her," she said. "I have a business to run. I wasn't ready for that kind of responsibility." Wick leaned forward. "You mean you weren't ready for a deaf child?" She didn't answer. He saw it then, shame and pride tangled together. "She's doing well now," Wick said quietly. "Better than well. She's happy, but she deserves to know the truth." Eleanor crossed her arms. "And what will that truth give her? Pain? Confusion? You think she needs that?" Wick didn't respond. He turned and walked out, every step heavier than the last. That night, when he tucked Hannah into bed, she handed him a drawing, him, her, and their dog, standing under a big sun with the word family written above. He smiled, but inside he was breaking. He couldn't tell her. Not yet. But secrets have a way of finding their own path to light. A few weeks later, a reporter from a business magazine requested an interview with Wick. He rarely accepted, but they promised to highlight his new education charity for deaf children, inspired by Hannah. The article was warm, heartfelt, until the day it went live. The headlines spread everywhere: "Billionaire adopts deaf niece, family scandal buried beneath philanthropy." The world exploded. Cameras showed up at the school, reporters shouted questions, and Hannah, confused and scared, saw her face on television screens for the first time. She didn't understand all the words, but she read the captions. "Abandoned. Deaf niece. Billionaire father figure." She ran out of class in tears. When Wick arrived, she was sitting alone under a tree, shaking. She didn't look at him when he crouched beside her. She signed one word, sharp and trembling: "Why?" Wick's chest tightened. He signed slowly, "I was going to tell you. I wanted to protect you." She shook her head, tears streaming down her cheeks. "You knew?" Her hands moved fast, angry. "You knew and you didn't tell me?" He reached out, but she pulled away. "She didn't want me," she signed, her hands small and broken. "No one did." Then she stood and walked toward the school gate, leaving him kneeling in the dirt. That night, the mansion felt emptier than it ever had before. Wick sat in his study, staring at her drawings pinned to the wall. Every one of them showed smiles, sunlight, and hope. He realized how fragile those things were, how easily truth could shatter them. He knew he had to make it right, not with words, but with action. The next morning, he went back to Austin, unannounced. Eleanor Grant wasn't pleased to see him. "You've made my name a circus?" she snapped. "My board is furious." "You did that to yourself," Wick said. "You left a child to suffer because she didn't fit your world. And now you get to face what that means." She rolled her eyes. "Spare me the moral lecture, Mr. Anderson. You think you're her hero? You're not her blood." Wick's jaw tightened. "I may not be her blood," he said, "but I'm her father." For a moment, silence. Then she whispered, "She's deaf, Wick. She'll never live a normal life." He stepped closer. "She doesn't need to be normal. She needs to be loved." When he left, he made one promise to himself: to never let Hannah believe she was less because of her silence. He doubled down on her education, hired the best ASL tutors, built a small art studio for her in the mansion. Slowly, Hannah began to open up again. Their bond, though scarred, started to heal. She began painting stories, her memories, her pain, her hope. Each canvas was louder than any voice. One evening, as Wick watched her paint, she paused, turned, and signed a question. "Is she my aunt?" He nodded quietly. She hesitated. "Will I ever meet her?" Wick looked at her and said the only thing he could: "If you want to." She thought for a long time, then shook her head. "Maybe one day." From that night on, Wick knew something had changed. Hannah wasn't just surviving anymore, she was understanding. She was learning that love doesn't erase pain, but it can rebuild from it. And Wick, for the first time since his wife's death, felt something close to peace. Because in saving her, he'd saved himself too. But as the world celebrated their story, someone else was watching from the shadows. Someone connected to Hannah's past who wasn't ready to let her go. And what was coming next would test the bond between father and daughter more than either of them could imagine. The weeks passed quietly after the storm of headlines faded. The world moved on, as it always does, but Wick Anderson and Hannah Kim were still rebuilding what the truth had shaken. Each morning began with the soundless rhythm of their new normal. Hannah at her art table, sketching with focus and fire, Wick in his office, trying to keep his company alive while pretending the empty spaces between their moments didn't hurt. Their bond had survived the betrayal of silence, but some things, once cracked, never fully smooth again. Still, Wick believed that love, in time, could heal anything. He didn't know the test of that belief was already walking toward him from miles away. It started with a letter. Not an email, not a call, but a real letter, folded, sealed, and hand-delivered by his assistant one gray afternoon. The handwriting was rough, hurried, as if the writer had forgotten how to hold a pen. To Mr. Wick Anderson. I need to talk to you about Hannah Kim. It's urgent. Please don't ignore this. I knew her father. The signature was just a name, J. Carter. No return address. Wick read it 3 times, each slower than the last. He felt a chill, the kind that comes when the past taps lightly on your door. Hannah's father, Daniel Kim, had died in the crash. There was nothing left to know, or so he thought. That night, after Hannah went to bed, Wick sat in his study turning the letter over and over. He tried to tell himself it was probably nothing. Maybe an old friend of Daniel's, or some opportunist smelling money. But the unease didn't leave him. At dawn, he decided to find out. He called a private investigator, a man named Holt he trusted with delicate matters, and gave him the letter. See if this J. Carter exists, he said. And if he does, find out what he wants. For a few days, life continued as usual. Hannah seemed lighter again, smiling more at school, even drawing a picture of herself and Wick under a big blue sky. But underneath the calm, Wick's mind stayed restless. Then, one Friday evening as he waited in his car outside the academy gates, Holt called. Found him, Holt said. Name's Joseph Carter. Former mechanic. Worked with Daniel Kim years ago. Lives in a trailer park outside Houston. Does he know about Hannah? Wick asked. He says he does. Says Daniel told him things before the crash. Things you'll want to hear in person. Wick felt the air grow heavier. Set it up, he said. 2 days later, Wick drove alone down a long stretch of Texas highway, his car slicing through wind and memory. When he arrived, the sun was low, and the trailer park looked like a forgotten patch of earth, rusted mailboxes, stray dogs, the smell of old rain. He found the right door, knocked once, and waited. It opened halfway, revealing a man in his late 50s with tired eyes and hands stained by grease. You Anderson? The man asked. Come in. Inside, the trailer was cluttered but clean, the kind of place that held stories on every shelf. Carter poured 2 cups of coffee, set one down, and said, I worked with Daniel Kim at a body shop near Austin. He was a good man. Talked about his wife, his little girl all the time. Wick nodded, saying nothing. Carter's hands trembled slightly as he continued. A few weeks before the accident, Daniel came to me. Said he was scared. He'd found something about his wife's sister, Eleanor. He said she was involved in some deal overseas, something illegal. He didn't say what, just that he was planning to go to the police if she didn't stop. Wick's stomach turned. Eleanor Grant again. You're telling me Daniel's death wasn't an accident? He said slowly. Carter met his eyes. I'm not saying that. But he told me if anything happened to him, to look out for his girl. He gave me this. He reached into a drawer and pulled out a small envelope, yellowed with time. Inside was a photo of Daniel, his wife, and Hannah as a baby, smiling, carefree, and a folded note in Daniel's handwriting. If you're reading this, it means I couldn't protect her. Please make sure Hannah finds safety, no matter what. Wick sat there for a long time, staring at the words. The crash had been ruled an accident. Rain, slick roads, nothing more. But now the shadows stretched longer. Why tell me this now? He asked finally. Carter sighed. Because I saw her picture on the news. And I thought maybe she's safe now. But if Eleanor had something to hide back then, you should be careful. That night, as Wick drove home, his thoughts spiraled. Could Eleanor really have been involved in something that dark? And if she was, did she know Hannah had survived? The more he thought, the more the puzzle twisted. He didn't want Hannah anywhere near that world. He wanted her to stay the child she was finally learning to be again. But secrets have a way of following those who try to bury them. The next morning, Hannah woke up to find Wick sitting by the kitchen counter, lost in thought. She signed a simple question, "You okay?" He smiled, forcing calm. "Just tired." She nodded and went back to drawing, unaware that the world outside was already shifting again. That afternoon, while Wick was on a call, the mansion's intercom buzzed. The gate guard's voice crackled through. "Sir, there's a man here asking for you. Says his name's Carter. Says it's urgent." Wick's blood ran cold. "Don't let him in," he said quickly, but before the guard could reply, another voice cut through, the one Wick feared most in that moment. "Sir, the girl let him through the side garden. She said he's your friend." Wick ran outside. There, in the backyard, stood Hannah, smiling, holding a sketchbook, and Carter, looking out of place and uneasy. "He said he knew my dad," she signed quickly, proud to have helped. Wick forced his breathing steady. "Inside, Hannah," he said softly. She hesitated, confused by his tone, but obeyed. When she was gone, Wick turned to Carter. "You shouldn't have come here." Carter's expression was apologetic. "I'm sorry. I thought you should see this." He handed over a small USB drive. "It's a copy of an email chain Daniel sent me before the crash. He said if anything happened, the truth might be in those messages." Wick took it reluctantly. "You said you didn't think the accident was intentional." "I didn't," Carter said. "But maybe it wasn't an accident either." That night, long after Hannah was asleep, Wick opened the files. There were half a dozen messages, all encrypted, between Daniel Kim and an address linked to Grant Communications. The subject lines were short, urgent. "Stop this before it's too late. You promised me it was clean. If Hannah's at risk, I'll go public." And the last one, sent the day before the crash. "You're leaving me no choice, Eleanor." Wick leaned back in his chair, heart pounding. It couldn't be coincidence. The crash, the silence, the aunt who turned her back, it all pointed in one direction. For hours he sat in darkness, the only light coming from the laptop screen. He knew exposing Eleanor would unleash chaos, but doing nothing could be worse. He also knew that if she truly had something to hide, Hannah's life might still be in danger. He had to protect her. Days passed, tense and heavy. Carter disappeared as suddenly as he'd appeared. Wick couldn't reach him, his phone disconnected, his trailer empty. Then one night, a text came through from an unknown number. "You should have left it alone." The next morning, the mansion's security cameras were dead. No feeds, no logs, no reason. Wick's instinct screamed. He rushed to Hannah's room. She was safe, still asleep, but he saw the window latch undone. Someone had been there. That was the moment he realized the story he'd stepped into wasn't about adoption anymore. It was about survival. He upgraded every system, hired new guards, and kept Hannah close. She noticed, of course. She always noticed. "Something wrong?" She signed. He smiled and lied again. "Just fixing things." She didn't believe him, but she didn't push. She trusted him too much. Weeks later, while Wick met with his legal team, Hannah found a letter slipped under her door. It was old and yellowed, written in Korean. She couldn't read all the words, but one sentence stood out. Her mother's name, written in familiar handwriting. Beneath it was a note in English. "Ask him about the night your parents died." She stared at it for a long time, her chest tight. When Wick came home, she didn't greet him like usual. She simply handed him the letter. "Where did you get this?" he asked. She pointed toward the window. "Someone put it there." His throat dried. Did you see them? She shook her head. That night, as rain hit the windows and thunder rolled over the hills, Wick sat by Hannah's bed watching her sleep. He wanted to believe this was all coincidence, old ghosts chasing their own echoes. But deep down he knew better. Somewhere, someone didn't want the truth to surface. Outside, in the darkness beyond the gate, a black car waited with its engine off. Inside it sat a figure scrolling through photos on a phone. Hannah at school, Hannah painting, Hannah smiling with Wick. The person zoomed in on her face and whispered, "You're still alive, little one. Just like your father feared." Then the car disappeared into the rain. Wick Anderson had built an empire on logic and control. But now he understood something terrifying: love makes logic useless. And when danger comes for the person you love most, you don't think, you don't calculate. You fight. Even if it means burning down everything you've built. The next chapter of their lives had already begun. They just didn't know it yet. The storm that night felt endless, as if the sky itself was warning Wick Anderson that something far darker than rain was coming. By morning, the mansion's halls were still echoing with the thunder that had passed, and every shadow felt heavier. Hannah woke up smiling, oblivious to the world's danger, but Wick saw something in her eyes, a small flicker of confusion that hadn't been there before. She could tell he was hiding something. She always could. He drove her to school as usual, the wipers slicing through the drizzle, his hand tight on the steering wheel. Hannah stared out the window, sketchbook in her lap. She wasn't drawing. She was thinking. When they reached the gate, she hesitated before stepping out. She turned, signed a single sentence, "You're scared." Wick froze, then forced a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Go on, kiddo. I'll pick you up later." But as she walked toward the academy doors, he knew she'd seen through him completely. Back in his office, Wick made a decision. No more half-truths. No more waiting for danger to come. He called Holt his investigator. "Find everything you can on Eleanor Grant. Every company, every offshore account, every deal she's made in the last decade." Holt didn't ask why. He'd heard that tone before, the tone of a man preparing for war. For days, Wick lived two lives. By day, the calm billionaire father, dropping Hannah off, attending board meetings, pretending to smile. By night, the relentless hunter, digging through records, encrypted files, and sealed court documents. The deeper he went, the uglier it became. Grant Communications wasn't just a media company, it was a cover. Beneath the glittering surface lay a web of money laundering, blackmail, and illegal exports under fake humanitarian contracts. Eleanor wasn't just ruthless, she was dangerous. And the timing of Daniel Kim's death wasn't random. There, buried in a decade-old email chain, Wick found it. A transfer of funds from Grant Communications to a shell company registered under a fake name. The date matched the day before Daniel's fatal crash. The recipient's alias? Pitt Carter. Wick's heart stopped. The same man who'd come to him claiming to help. He rechecked the files. The numbers matched, the signature was real. Joseph Carter had been paid by Eleanor's company 24 hours before the accident. His mind raced. Carter had lied. The warning, the USB, even the photo, it was bait. Someone had set this up to pull him in. He called Holt again, but this time, the line rang and rang until it cut to silence. Then a text appeared, "Stop digging." That night, Wick couldn't sleep. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw Carter's face, heard Eleanor's cold voice in his memory, and felt Hannah's trust pressing against his conscience. He wanted to protect her, but how do you protect a child from ghosts that wear family faces? At 2 a.m., his phone buzzed. A video message. He opened it and froze. The screen showed grainy footage of Hannah's school hallway. The timestamp was from an hour ago. A figure in a dark coat was standing by her locker, leaving something inside. Then the video ended. No sound. No text. Just an address. Wick didn't think. He just moved. Within minutes, he was in his car, speeding through the empty Texas streets toward the academy. When he arrived, the campus was silent. He found the locker, number 107 Hannah's. Inside was a small black phone and a folded note. "You want the truth? Meet me alone. 9 p.m. tomorrow. Old Freight Yard, South Gate." No signature, But he didn't need one. The handwriting was the same as the letter that started it all. Carter's. He could have called the police. He could have walked away. But he couldn't risk them coming after Hannah again. He'd end this himself. The next day he acted normal. Made breakfast. Took Hannah to school. Told her he'd be home late for business. But when she hugged him goodbye, she didn't let go. She looked up at him with those wide brown eyes and signed, "Promise you'll come back." He hesitated, then nodded. She smiled, but deep down she already knew something was wrong. Night fell fast. The freight yard was a graveyard of steel and silence, lit by the weak glow of old floodlights. Wick's car rolled to a stop between the abandoned cargo containers. He stepped out, the wind biting his face, and waited. Footsteps echoed from the shadows. Carter emerged, hands in his pockets, eyes darting. "You lied to me," Wick said coldly. Carter looked tired, scared. "You don't understand. I understand you were paid by Eleanor Grant," Wick interrupted. "You set me up. You dragged me into this." Carter shook his head. "It's not what you think. She used me. I didn't know the girl survived until I saw the news. I tried to fix it." "Fix it?" Wick spat. "You were part of what killed her parents." Carter's shoulders slumped. It was supposed to be a warning, not murder. Daniel was going to expose her. Eleanor wanted the files destroyed. She paid me to intercept him, not kill him. The crash wasn't my doing. He looked at the ground. But I was there. I saw the car go off the road. I heard the screams. Wick's fists clenched. "And you ran." Carter's voice cracked. "I ran because I knew she'd kill me next. She's not done, Anderson. She knows you have the emails." Before Wick could reply, headlights flared behind them. A black SUV skidded to a stop, doors flying open. Men in suits stepped out, silent, armed, professional. Carter's face went white. "Run," he whispered. But Wick didn't move. The first man raised his gun. A flash, a single crack. Carter dropped instantly, lifeless on the gravel. Wick dove behind a crate as bullets sliced through metal. He grabbed Carter's phone and bolted deeper into the yard. He didn't stop running until the sounds faded behind him. His lungs burned, his hands shaking. Carter was dead. And whoever sent those men wasn't guessing. They knew. Eleanor's reach was real, and now she'd made it clear. Hannah wasn't just a child in danger. She was a witness. Back home, Wick hid the phone and burned Carter's letter. He couldn't sleep that night, couldn't even sit still. Every sound made him check the windows. Hannah, sensing his unrest, came to his room in her pajamas, carrying her teddy bear. She couldn't hear his shaking breath, but she saw his fear. She sat beside him and laid her small hand over his. That was all it took, one gesture to remind him what he was fighting for. The next morning, the world looked normal again. Sunshine, birds, laughter. But inside, Wick was already planning their escape. He contacted Holt's backup team, arranged new identities, and started transferring assets offshore. They'd leave the country within a week. Start over. Somewhere safe. But fate has a cruel sense of timing. 2 days before their planned departure, while Hannah was at art class, Wick received an email from an unknown sender. No text, just a single video file. He clicked play. It showed Hannah's classroom, recorded from outside the window. The camera zoomed in on her face as she laughed with another student. Then it panned to a black car parked nearby. The license plate was visible, HJ01. Eleanor Grant's personal vehicle. Wick's blood ran cold. The message was clear, she'd found them. He rushed to the school, heart hammering. When he arrived, the car was gone, but Hannah was safe. He didn't tell her what he'd seen. That night, while she slept, he packed their bags. Tomorrow, they'd vanish. But just before dawn, the mansion's alarm shattered the silence. Security lights flared. Wick grabbed his gun and ran for Hannah's room, empty. The window was open again. His world stopped. On the bed was a single note written in elegant handwriting. "You can't protect what was never yours to begin with." Wick's roar filled the halls. The guards found nothing. No cameras, no prints, no car tracks. She was gone. He collapsed on the floor, shaking. Every memory of her laughter, her sketches, her first day at school, it all came crashing at once. He'd promised to keep her safe, and now she was somewhere out there, in the hands of the woman who destroyed her family. The next morning, news broke quietly. Eleanor Grant was seen boarding her private jet in Houston. Destination unknown. Wick knew then what he had to do. He wasn't just a billionaire anymore. He was a father with nothing left to lose. He opened Carter's phone one last time. Inside was a folder labeled proof. Photos, documents, location coordinates. And at the bottom, a final message from Daniel Kim himself, voice barely audible through static. If you're hearing this, it means she found Hannah. Protect her. Don't let her grow up in her shadow. Please. Wick stared at the screen, tears burning his eyes. I won't fail her again, he whispered. Outside, dawn was breaking over Texas. But for Wick Anderson, the light no longer meant peace. It meant war. He took one last look at Hannah's drawing pinned to the wall, the one of the two of them under a blue sky, and tucked it into his pocket. Then he grabbed his coat, walked out of the house, and disappeared into the rising sun. Somewhere out there, his little girl was waiting. And no matter what stood in his way, he'd find her. Even if it meant burning the world down to do it. The sun rose over Texas that morning, but for Wick Anderson, light meant nothing anymore. His mansion, once a symbol of success, was now a hollow grave of memories. The echoes of Hannah's laughter were gone, replaced by the silent hum of security drones and the constant ache of failure. He stood by the window, still wearing the same shirt from last night, the note from Eleanor crumpled in his fist. You can't protect what was never yours to begin with. The words played over and over in his mind like a curse. He had money, power, influence, but none of it mattered now. The one thing that gave his life meaning had been taken. And this time, he wouldn't wait for the system to fix it. He was going to burn every bridge, every lie, and every person standing between him and Hannah. Within hours, Wick's team of private operatives was assembled in his underground office. 5 men who owed him favors that couldn't be spoken aloud. Maps were spread across the table, flight paths, digital traces, surveillance photos. On one screen was the last confirmed sighting, Eleanor Grant's jet, landing in Monterrey, Mexico. Then the signal vanished. Wick's eyes didn't move from the screen. We start there, he said. They left that night. Wick barely slept on the flight. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw Hannah's terrified face, the way she used to grip his hand when crossing the street. The thought of her somewhere scared and alone fueled something primal in him. He wasn't the calm businessman anymore. He was a father with a war in his heart. When they arrived, Monterrey was hot and crowded, a maze of markets and noise. Wick moved like a ghost through the chaos, using aliases, burner phones, encrypted channels. He learned that Eleanor had ties to a shell organization posing as a children's charity, one that relocated orphans for adoption across borders. On paper, it looked noble. In reality, it was a network for trafficking data, art, and sometimes, people. The deeper he dug, the clearer it became. Hannah wasn't kidnapped for ransom. She was leverage. By the third night, Wick found a lead, a warehouse near the industrial port. Locals said it belonged to a woman with American ties, guarded day and night. That was enough for him. He waited until dark, then went in alone. Inside, the air smelled of oil and salt. Stacks of metal containers lined the walls, and faint voices echoed through the corridors. He moved quietly, gun drawn, heart pounding. From behind one door, he heard a sound that made his chest tighten, a soft hum. A melody. The same tune Hannah used to hum when she painted. He froze. It couldn't be. He pushed the door open. The room was small, dimly lit, filled with children, 7 or 8 of them, most sleeping on thin mats. In the corner sat a little girl drawing on the floor. Not Hannah. For a second, his heart broke all over again. But when she looked up, her eyes, dark, sad, locked on him, and she signed a single word, help. He knelt, handed her his phone, and typed a message. Where is Hannah Kim? She pointed toward a metal staircase. Upstairs. He didn't think twice. He moved fast, up the stairs, through a hall, until he reached a door with gold trim, the only luxury in this rusted building. He kicked it open. Inside was a small office, and behind the desk sat a woman he hadn't seen in years. Eleanor Grant. She didn't flinch. She just smiled that cold, perfect smile. You finally came, she said. Wick's jaw tightened. Where is she? Eleanor tilted her head. Safe. For now. She stood, walking slowly toward him. You should have stayed out of this, Wick. You were a businessman, not a savior. But you let emotion make you reckless. Just like Daniel did. Wick's eyes darkened. You killed them. Eleanor's smile didn't fade. No, Wick. They killed themselves. He couldn't stop digging. She couldn't stop crying. I simply made it all disappear. She leaned close. The girl was supposed to disappear too. But fate is funny, isn't it? Before Wick could react, the door burst open. Armed guards flooded the room. Eleanor stepped back. Arrest him, she said calmly. But the guards hesitated. Wick's team had followed him in, taking positions outside. Within seconds, the room erupted in chaos, gunfire, shouts, breaking glass. Wick dove behind the desk, grabbed Eleanor, and slammed her against the wall. Where is she? He shouted. Eleanor only laughed. You'll never find her. She's already gone. He didn't wait. He tied her hands, searched her desk, and found a keycard marked Level B, Secure Storage. He ran downstairs again, deeper this time, past locked doors and narrow halls until he found an elevator leading underground. The doors opened to a vast chamber lit by fluorescent lights. Rows of cages lined the room, each one holding frightened children. But at the very end, standing silently in the center, was Hannah. She didn't move when she saw him. Her eyes were wide, unsure if he was real. Slowly, Wick stepped forward, hands trembling. It's me, he said softly, knowing she couldn't hear, but hoping she could feel it. She blinked once, then twice. And then she ran, straight into his arms. For the first time in weeks, he felt life again. She was real. Alive. Shaking but alive. He held her so tightly he could barely breathe. She buried her face in his chest, signing rapidly through tears. You came. Always, he signed back, his hands shaking. But their moment lasted only seconds. The alarms went off. Red lights flashed across the walls. Wick grabbed her hand and ran. The facility was collapsing into chaos, guards shouting, kids crying, sirens wailing. He led Hannah toward the back exit, his heart hammering. Bullets ricocheted around them, but somehow, they made it outside into the humid night. His team's van screeched to a stop nearby. Holt, bruised but alive, pulled them in. Got her? He shouted. Wick nodded, breathless. Drive. They sped through the city, chased by black SUVs. Hannah clung to Wick, silent tears streaking her face. He held her close, whispering promises she couldn't hear but understood anyway. Behind them, the city burned. They reached the border by dawn, the sun painting the horizon gold. But freedom came with a price. As they crossed the bridge, Eleanor's last move played out. A truck blocked their path, and armed police surrounded them. Someone had tipped them off. Wick was dragged from the van, Hannah screaming silently as men pulled her away again. Don't you touch her, he roared, but his voice vanished into chaos. Hours later, Wick woke up in a holding cell, wrists bruised, vision blurry. Across from him sat Holt, whispering urgently. They took Hannah to a private facility in California. Eleanor's pulling strings in the U.S. government now. She's framing you as part of a trafficking ring. Wick's blood turned to fire. Then we fight back. He spent the next 48 hours planning the impossible. With Holt's help, he escaped custody using an old contact in the FBI, a man who owed him a debt from years ago. Wick disappeared again, this time with a single mission: expose Eleanor Grant once and for all. Weeks later, a video leaked online. It was raw, unedited, and damning. Footage from the Monterey facility, audio recordings from Eleanor's office, and Daniel Kim's final message. If this reaches you, know that truth always wins, eventually. The clip went viral within hours. Every news outlet picked it up. Protests erupted outside Grant Communications. Within days, Eleanor was arrested on charges of conspiracy, corruption, and murder. But Wick didn't care about headlines. Cared about one thing: Hannah. He found her in a quiet hospital in California, surrounded by doctors and agents who finally realized she was a victim, not a pawn. When she saw him, her eyes filled instantly with tears. She ran to him again, this time not out of fear, but relief. He lifted her into his arms, holding her as if the world could end right there and it wouldn't matter. They didn't speak. They didn't need to. In that moment, everything was said. Weeks later, they returned home to Texas. The mansion was different now, simpler, quieter, filled with color again because Hannah painted every wall she could reach. Wick sat by the fireplace one night watching her draw. She turned to him and signed, "Are we safe now?" He smiled. "We're safe." But deep down, he knew safety wasn't the same as peace. He still woke up sometimes to the sound of sirens in his head. Still saw Eleanor's smile in his dreams. But every time he looked at Hannah, those ghosts faded a little more. She'd been broken, he'd been lost, but somehow, they'd built something unshakable out of pain, family. And as the camera would slowly pull back on their small, quiet world, Wick's voice would echo in the distance, soft but steady. Money can build a house, but love builds a home. And sometimes, the family you choose is the one that saves you from yourself. The screen fades to black. But before the credits roll, a single line appears. Months later, in a high-security prison, Eleanor Grant receives an envelope with no sender. Inside is a child's drawing of a man and a girl under a blue sky. Her smile fades. And somewhere far away, in the safety of her father's arms, Hannah paints another one, this time with no shadows. Years passed. Seasons changed. The world forgot the scandal, the headlines faded, but inside the tall gates of the Anderson estate, life quietly began again. The girl who once begged for scraps on the streets of Texas was now 17, graceful, confident, and filled with life. Hannah Kim Anderson had grown into everything Wick once dreamed she could be: brilliant, compassionate, and unafraid to speak, even without sound. She stood on the balcony one morning, hair tied back, sunlight warming her face. Below her, Wick was in the garden, trimming the roses she planted years ago. The same roses that had once symbolized loss now stood tall, bright red against the morning air. Life was peaceful again. But peace, like glass, can crack without warning. One afternoon, while cleaning the attic, Hannah found a small locked box with her name written in faded ink. She recognized Wick's handwriting instantly. Her hands trembled as she turned the key she found taped underneath. Inside was a letter, yellowed and folded carefully. The first line made her knees weak. "If you're reading this, you're old enough to know the truth." It was from Wick. He had written it years ago, when she was still a child, just in case he didn't survive that night in Monterey. The words were heavy, filled with pain and honesty. He told her everything: the truth about her parents, the accident, Eleanor's crimes, the lies he had to tell to protect her. He ended with a single promise: "I never wanted to take you from your past. I only wanted to give you a future." By the time she finished reading, tears had blurred the ink. She sat there for a long time, staring at the words of the man who had saved her more than once, not just from danger, but from despair. By the time she finished reading, tears had blurred the ink. She sat there for a long time, staring at the words of the man who had saved her more than once, not just from danger, but from despair. He looked at her for a long moment. Then slowly he smiled. "Because I wanted you to live forward, not backward." She nodded, tears in her eyes. "You're my father," she signed. "No matter what the world says." Wick swallowed hard, his heart breaking and healing all at once. "And you're my reason," he signed back. From that night on, something changed between them. They weren't just survivor and savior anymore. They were family in every way that mattered. But fate wasn't done testing them. A month later, Wick received a call that chilled him. Eleanor Grant had died in prison, but before her death, she'd left behind a sealed envelope addressed to him. No one knew its contents. The warden sent it overnight. Wick opened it carefully, half expecting another threat. Inside was a single sheet of paper and an old photograph. The photo showed Eleanor, Daniel Kim, and a woman Wick didn't recognize, until he looked closer. It was Hannah's mother, smiling, arm around Eleanor. On the back of the photo, a line written in Eleanor's elegant handwriting, Truth is never one-sided. Attached to it was a DNA report. The name it revealed made Wick's blood turn cold. It wasn't Hannah's parents' names, it was his. The document claimed that Wick Anderson was Hannah's biological father. He froze. Every thought collided in his head. Was it real? A manipulation? A lie Eleanor planted to twist his mind one last time? He couldn't tell. But the dates, the details, they lined up. He'd known Hannah's mother years ago, briefly, before his rise to wealth. A fleeting connection he buried under ambition. Could it be true? For days, he said nothing. He couldn't. He didn't want to shatter the fragile peace they'd built. But Hannah noticed his distance. She always did. One night, she found him staring out at the lake, the letter clutched in his hand. She approached quietly, sat beside him, and waited. Finally, he handed her the photo and the report. She studied them silently. Then she looked at him, not shocked, not angry, just calm. After a long pause, she signed, "Does it matter?" He looked away, tears burning his eyes. "It changes everything," he whispered, though she couldn't hear it. But she understood anyway. No, she said, "It changes nothing. You've always been my father. You chose me when no one else did. That's what makes you mine." He broke then, not from pain but from relief. He reached out, held her close, and for the first time, allowed himself to believe that maybe fate hadn't been cruel after all. Maybe it had brought them together on purpose. Years later, when Hannah turned 21, she gave a speech, through sign language, at a university event for inclusive education. The crowd was silent, mesmerized, as her interpreter voiced her words. "I used to think silence was my curse," she signed, her eyes bright. "But silence made me listen, to pain, to love, to truth. My father once told me that money builds houses, but love builds homes. He saved me not because he had to, but because he chose to. And I learned that family isn't blood. It's the people who see your scars and call them stories." The crowd erupted in applause. Wick sat in the front row, tears streaming freely, pride swelling so fiercely it hurt. When she looked at him from the stage, they both smiled. Two survivors, two souls forever intertwined by something stronger than fate. After the event, they drove home quietly. The night was cool, the sky filled with stars. Hannah leaned her head on his shoulder as the car rolled through the gates. Inside, her latest painting hung above the fireplace. A simple one. Two figures standing under a bright blue sky, holding hands. Beneath it, she had written a single line in her careful handwriting, "I was lost once, but love found me." Sometimes life takes everything from you, just to show you what truly matters. Wick Anderson thought he was rescuing a child, but in the end, she was the one who saved him, from loneliness, from regret, from himself. Love doesn't always speak. Sometimes it simply stays. The screen fades to black. And then, one last shot. Hannah, years later, standing at an art exhibition, surrounded by her paintings of children smiling, playing, laughing. A reporter asks her through an interpreter, "What inspires your art?" She smiles, signing with a calm certainty that only comes from peace. A billionaire once adopted a homeless and deaf Korean girl. That girl was me. He didn't just give me a home, he gave me a voice. The reporter smiles. And where is he now? Hannah looks toward the doorway. There stands Wick, older, proud, watching her from across the room. Their eyes meet. She signs softly just for him. "Thank you." He nods, whispering the words she can't hear but somehow always feels. "Always, kiddo." Some stories don't end. They become legacies.